Hey everybody, welcome back to the Calibrate Tools and DIY channel. I am your host, the Tool Tutor, as I am known on TikTok. I am also on Instagram, calibrate.diy.tools as well. I'm also on Facebook as Calibrate Tools and DIY. So guys, you'll find me on the different platforms. I needed to start promoting them more than I have been before because I really haven't been, but I do exist on other platforms other than YouTube. But anyway, guys, we're gonna jump right into it. Hope you guys had a good 3-day weekend, I should say, and hope you enjoyed yourself. And if you're back to work, you know, everybody's back on the grind. I get it. I'm there too as well. Well, without hesitation, let's dive into the topic: what the next 30 years looks like for African Americans in the trades. And why do you say? I'm sure some of you are saying, well, why are you just focusing on African Americans? Well, for one, I am an African American, and I have a right to focus on the goings-ons of this community because it's it's definitely needed. There's a lot of things that needs to be addressed, and that's what I use my platform for. Okay, so if that bothers you, then feel free to go elsewhere. But if you are interested in learning, because the issues that I discuss don't just apply to African Americans. It really affects everybody. Um, but when we're specifically talking about a specific group or topic, that's because the problems there need to be addressed immediately, and that's what I do. All right. So let's dive into it. Um, what the next 30 years looks like for African Americans in the trades. Well, first of all, did you know that African American workers are severely underrepresented in the trades, right? In construction, 6%. It's only 6% of African Americans um, are in the trades, and that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know why that stat is. It seems static, meaning that it has not moved since I don't know when. But what's the reason for that? Okay. Well, for one, there's been a legacy, all right, of discrimination even in the trades, guys. As much as I love the trades and all that, there's a dark side to everything, especially when it comes to the distribution of wealth and the distribution of labor in this country, and it all falls along the lines of race. And a lot of people don't like to talk about race because it's a sensitive subject. But go ahead and stick your head in the sand. And nobody's making something all about race. This country's made it about race from the beginning. Okay, so we're just talking about what exists, and what we deal with. Okay, it's not what defeats us, but it's definitely a factor. Okay, in the American landscape. All right, the global landscape, if you really want to talk about it. It says for decades, many construction trades and unions systematically excluded Black workers through formal and informal barriers. Okay, this created generational gaps where trade skills, connections, and opportunities weren't passed down through families and communities. So you see, guys, there's a domino effect when it comes to this stuff. When it comes to discrimination and gatekeeping, along the lines of race, that's going to have very lasting effects that can last generations in terms of, the relationships you build if you were allowed to do certain things, right? These relationships to be handed down over generations to help to build the wealth of that community that was denied African Americans. Okay, and to an extent, it still is today. I urge if you are a person of African descent, Black, Native, whatever you want to call yourself today. I urge you to focus on your community, build the connections within your own community. Okay, that will be the only thing that will insulate you from all the stuff we're talking about that right now that are against you in terms of all the racial politics that pervade this country today. Okay, I was talking to a friend not too long ago, and he was a Caucasian guy. Well, I should say, he's still alive, and he was talking to me. He brought up the subject of the violence in Chicago. That talking point that white folks like to bring up all the time to kind of deflect from their, from the rabid racism that exists in this country. Oh, look at Chicago. They're shooting and killing each other and all that stuff. And you know what? I can't really say that that's not true. That's probably that. I'm sure that there is a lot. I don't know the stats particularly on that, but yeah, that does exist, right? There is dysfunction within the African American community, and it displays itself in the form of gang violence and all this lower vibrational activity within our communities. And he referred to this stuff. He said he couldn't understand why this stuff is happening. He even used the word demonic. This is demonic activity that's happening. And look, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if you guys believe in demons or not, or demonic activity, whether you're religious or you may use another term other than demonic. But this is the term he used. And I sat there and I listened to him. I said, yeah, that's there's a lot of dysfunction going on in those in certain areas. But what I could not understand is that, does he feel that the history of the United States in terms of how they've treated the African American population, right, who they deemed as 3/5 of a human being, not worthy of respect by any white man? These are not my words. These are words from political figures throughout history. J. Edgar Hoover was one of those such people. He said that, the greatest threat to U.S. security was Black unity. And I know, some people will say, well, he never said that. He was just referring to the Black Panther Party. Well, what did the Black Panther Party? Why did they exist? The Black Panther Party was a result. Okay, they were formed to protect their communities from violent racism. Violent racists who were attacking and destroying their communities, disenfranchising their communities. So in effect, he was saying that the very same thing. He did not want Black unity presented a threat to the status quo, right? And when they went in there and wiped them out, Fred Hampton was assassinated in his bed, laying in his bed with his family, his wife. He was shot in the head or whatever. So they took care of that problem, right? They took that figurehead out of the picture. All right. So all of this ties into what I'm saying here. Okay. This ties right back into why African Americans only represent 6% of construction workers. Okay. That's not just an accident. Okay. And you got to know that, right? You got to know that. What else? Lack of networks. Construction often relies heavily on word of mouth hiring and family friend referrals. Historical exclusion meant fewer Black workers developed these crucial network connections. As I said before, how could you develop connections when you're excluded from the workforce, excluded from the industry, right? Now, I'm sure back then, even though they were excluded, there were some industrious African Americans who, despite the specter, the dark specter of racism and discrimination, they made a way anyway, right? There were still builders in the community, tradesmen in the community, men that taught their future generations how to build their communities, right? And that's why you had towns like, matter of fact, let me pull this up. You had various towns throughout the United States that were thriving Black communities. I'll just list a few of them. Let's see here. Give me a second, guys. Yeah, I'll just list a few of them. Okay, so we had towns, we had our own stores, hospitals, police stations. Okay, somebody's quoting here, says a quick history lesson that from 1879 to 2015. Okay, let's see here. They're talking about a few towns. Eufaula, Alabama, Rosewood, Florida, Slocum, Texas, Oscarville, Georgia, Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Overtown, Florida. I'm very familiar with Overtown in Florida because I lived in Miami a good portion of my life. I'd say about 11 years. all my teen years and young adulthood, I lived in Miami, Florida. So I'm very familiar with Overtown. Overtown would be considered like a rundown part of town in Florida, in Miami, Florida, right? In South Florida, where you see all the lower elements of human behavior displayed, drug addicts, abandoned buildings, all that stuff is down there. It was a thriving Black community at one point. Okay. It was a thriving Black community at one point, just like all these other cities that I just mentioned. Okay. There's many more places in the US that were Black owned and operated. But guess what happened to them? They were destroyed. They were destroyed. Okay. They were burnt down, sabotaged, whatever. They were systematically destroyed. Some of these places even had bombs dropped on them. Okay. You talk about dropping bombs in other countries. Well, you had the United States drop bombs on their own citizens, right? Whom they probably didn't even consider people. Learn a little bit of history before you start spouting off talking points about this. Okay, a lot of farmland was confiscated. Private properties of Black families were confiscated, guys, all throughout history, the history of this country. What do you think that did to the generational wealth that could have been accumulated? It wiped it out, and that was the whole design, to wipe it out, wipe out Black wealth, destroy the Black family. They dropped drugs in the community in the 80s, okay, to destroy Black communities. Of course, they had the opium wars overseas, and they did the same thing to other countries, but those countries were able to rebound because it was their native land, and so they were able to expel any of the negative influences of Western imperialism that has ravaged certain communities, like our community over here, right? So we had all these thriving towns and cities, and so when I hear an ignorant, toothless racist, whatever you want to call them, talk about how violent the Black community is and how useless and unproductive they are, then I would advise him to, if they can read, if they can actually read or even formulate a coherent sentence, is to open up a book. But they won't do that. Why won't they do that? They won't do that because it will actually hurt their brain to do that. It would physically give them pain to actually look at this stuff. Cognitive dissonance is a very painful thing, when it's being stripped away, right? When it's almost like the light's too bright for your eyes. You know how painful it is when light's too bright. It's actually a physical pain. That's what happens to these people when they can't digest the truth, right? So they have to live a lie in order to exist. And but we know better. So this is what has happened. Let's see. Let's go on back. Okay, let's go on back to our list here. All right. So why? Once again, I will always kind of draw myself back to the main point of the live here. Educational and training barriers, limited exposure. Many young Black Americans aren't exposed to construction careers through school programs, family connections, or community initiatives at the same rates as other groups. I used to be I used to teach. I was a welding instructor at a welding school out here, and where I am in Southern California. And there were the classroom demographics. It was mostly Hispanics, and then it was maybe, I would say, at most 5 African Americans that were at any given class session that attended. And that drew a lot of concern from me, and I wonder why that was. So I questioned the leadership of the establishment as to why that was, and is it? And I understand the demographics in Southern California is mostly Hispanic anyway, so I can kind of see how that would translate into the classroom, right? When you look at the classroom, you see the demographics. But I also question the amount of outreach that was being implemented, or to specifically African American kids or adults about the program. And if I had probably stayed with that particular nonprofit, which I did not because of certain conflicts of interest, I should say, I probably would have really dug down into me personally, right? Reaching out to my community to bring them in to learn the trade or the skill of welding. But that, unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I'm not one to dismiss self accountability as well. I do believe that we as a people, I'm specifically talking to African Americans right now, and that we need to push our children not into the sport, not into being, the flag football team or trying to play sports and this and that. No, push them into the trades, push them into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. That's where we need to get strong at. Okay, push them into that. Make that the epitome of achievement in their minds. Not throwing a football. Okay, or not trying to go pro. Only a small percentage of our kids are going to go pro, right? And they're handpicked, and it's designed that way. Okay, but what we can do is change the mindsets of our kids to not seek these things. These establishments like the NFL and the NBA and all that stuff, they make all the money because we're pushing our kids into these things, right? Which makes the owners of these teams and whatever money. It's almost like gladiator sports back in the days, right? They were revered for their physical prowess, but that's it. That's all they were seen as, right? So we need to change that stereotype, change that way of thinking. And look how these teams and these establishments, these sports establishments, look how they treat you. Look how they treat you. Do they give a damn about you? You know what I mean? You're just a body to them. You're just, okay, let's throw a football, but you're so caught up in it. I did a post on TikTok maybe a few months ago, and I maybe not a few months ago, but I talked about how surprised certain individuals are when you tell them that you're not interested in sports. It's like they get they have a minor aneurysm in their eyes kind of opens, like, what? You're not interested in sports? You're wow, shouldn't you be? You're 6 foot tall. You're African American. This is what in their mind. So it's like, and when you change and you say, no, I don't really follow sports like that. And for a very good reason. It's because, number one, I think it's a big distraction for our community. We can't afford to be unless you're an athlete, unless you're into that, right? But we can't afford to just be focused on that, right? We need to focus more internally. Forget about all that stuff, okay, that they want you to be focused on, all right? And focus on other things that will grow your community and get it back to what it was back in the Reconstruction era, right? You know what I mean? When we had these thriving towns, even though they destroyed it, we won't allow that to happen again, obviously. But yeah. So, but back to the guy. I know I'm kind of jumping around, but back to the friend of mine, the Caucasian guy. I was he referred to the what's happening in Chicago and all these other places, inner cities, and violence as demonic. And I was like, okay, well, what's demonic is how whites have treated African Americans in this country, and even to this day, to certain degrees. And that's the real demonic activity that's going on. Okay, putting drugs in the community to stifle and destroy that community, mass incarceration of Black men, taking them out of the home, turning the woman into a literal dependent on the system, right? And and then you're shoving all this other stuff in their face, like to be successful, sports. Oh, this is what entertainment. All right, you can't just afford to be entertainers all your life, bro. This is what they want, for you to entertain them like the minstrel shows of the past. Okay, that's what you are, all for a few $1 million, right? And your community is still suffering. All right, what are some of the other reasons? Okay, that we're just only 6% in the construction workforce. Apprenticeship access. Okay, apprenticeship access. Traditional apprenticeship programs, which are key pathways into skilled trades, have historically had limited outreach to Black community and may have informal barriers to entry. Yeah, why would you limit the apprenticeship access to the African American community? Well, this is probably the same reason that you denied soldiers coming back from war, Black soldiers that have fought and died for this country, and all the campaigns overseas, fighting and dying for your country, coming home to be lynched, coming home to be denied access, you're not to whatever they were entitled. The GI Bill, for example. Okay, imagine that, right? Imagine that. Okay. So of course they're going to deny apprenticeship access to certain communities, right? They don't want you getting skilled. They don't want you to be able to go in there and build a house by yourself, or you know what I mean, or run the electrical in a building, or this and that. Traditional apprenticeship programs, have been historically limited in the outreach portion of it, right? What else? Economic and geographical factors, location mismatches. This is what it says. Many construction jobs are in suburban or rural areas, while significant Black populations are concentrated in urban areas. Do you think that's an accident why they're concentrated in urban areas? It's like they corral you like cattle in certain areas, okay? And it creates these geographical barriers, right? Transportation. Getting to job sites often requires reliable transportation, which can be challenging for workers without cars or in areas with limited public transit. Hey, look, if you want to get into a business or start some kind of a nonprofit, I'm just throwing it out there. Just get a fleet of vans or something like that and go pick up your kids and take them to a trade school or wherever they need to go, okay? And you can get money for that. Workplace culture concerns. Perceived environment. Some Black workers may avoid construction due to concerns about workplace culture, discrimination, or lack of advancement opportunities. Yeah, that's just being shell-shocked. That's being shell-shocked, guys. That's PTSD from generations of being discriminated against, being violently attacked on the work site, denied opportunities for advancement on the work site. Okay, all of that is a reason why some people may not even want to put themselves through that. Retention issues. Even when workers enter the industry, retention can be challenging if they don't feel welcomed or supported. Well, really. I mean, that's the most understated thing of the century. Who wants to be in a hostile environment, whether it's physically hostile or emotionally hostile environment, right? Nobody wants to be that. But they foster these hostile environments for African Americans and other minorities as well, because they want to maintain a certain culture, right? And we all know what that culture is, as a dominant culture in that particular ecosystem. Okay, economic alternatives. All right, let's check. I know I'm rambling on here, but let's go ahead and see what else. Okay, so basically, guys, the whole point of this, anytime I bring up topics around this, the goal is to get you to think about self-sufficiency and independence, right? They have the schools, right? They're the school. Go to the schools out there to learn the skill, the trade, or whatever you need to learn. But there's something called brain drain. Like a lot of say foreign students, right? They'll go to another country and they go to university, or they'll go to some school to learn something, and they stay in that country, right? They don't bring their knowledge back to build their own countries, right? But it's the same principle here, right? What we need to do is just the skills that we know, the skills that we learn. We need to, we need to join. We need to pretty much amalgamate all of these skills amongst ourselves and create our own institutions. That's the only way, right? Because looking at the current climate in the United States is pretty much, it seems like it's gone backwards. Let's talk about it, especially in terms of this administration, Trump's administration, right? Okay, so let's see. Based on the search results, significant policy changes since this administration came to be, right? It's almost taken away a lot of the progress of the African American community. Number one, the elimination of DEI programs. Okay, a lot of DEI programs were terminated. Okay, by the federal government, right? Because they say DEI was discriminatory. Can you believe that? Right? Can you believe this? So look at the black unemployment rate. It has risen to 7.2% in July of 2025. I'm reading some stats here. That's up from 6.8% the prior month and 6.3% the prior year. Okay. Now, I know you hear a lot about African American women, black women. They're the most educated demographic in the United States. You hear that all the time, right? Well, 300,000 black women were kicked out of the labor force. Okay, very recently, I think it says in the second quarter. And what does that tell you? Now, the black woman has been the backbone of the black community for a long time, right? Why is that? Because she's not really considered as much of a threat. She was allowed in spaces where the black man was not, right? Because, you know, he's seen as the existential threat, right, in the minds of whites. And generally speaking, okay, I'm not talking about all individual Caucasians, but generally speaking, he is. That's why he's targeted for mass incarceration the most, right? That's why he is 6% of the construction workforce, because a lot of us are behind bars, man, doing hard time, trying to fight this system that's because these are private prisons. You understand? It's about money, right? And we've always been the commodity. Our bodies have always been the commodity in this country, right? From slavery, right? Working for free, backbreaking work for free, working yourself to death, all the way up to 2025, okay? To being the most incarcerated man in the world in the United States. So where does that leave our women, right? Well, they're the ones that's going to have to carry the load, raise the kids. Of course, a single woman is not equipped to raise that's my opinion. It's not equipped to raise a kid by herself. She can only do so much. Yes, she can be the best mother in the world, but there are certain things that child can only get from a father. Okay, point blank. Period. You can disagree with me all you want. So now African American women are, they've been, working in these federal institutions where a lot of our people have been. And this administration pretty much dropped the bomb on that. 300,000 of our women have been forced out of the labor force. So what's that going to do to the community? That's going to put even more stress on the community, right? So that, this is some of the things the administration has done. Which, I mean, if you're doing things like this, it's kind of hard for you to deny what I've been talking about on this live. This is in 2025. Okay. Voting access. Okay. That's always been under attack when it came to us, suppressing our vote. It says executive orders have been issued that seek to create significant barriers to voting. This is old news. Okay. This is just an old tactic. Okay. Including documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote. All right. So now, you know what that does, and that ties into everything that's been going on as far as immigration and citizenship and all that. Even citizens are under attack. All right, let's see here. So, all right. So yeah, guys, I hope you see how all this is tying in. I know I'm talking a lot and I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but ultimately, guys, you got to look at these stats. Don't stick your head in the sand and say, well, I got a good job, so I'm all good. That's not how it works, man. That's not how it works. You're not all good if we're not all good, okay? And we can't depend on this system, right, to fix it, right? You just can't depend on a politician to fix it. You can't depend on the president to fix it. Look at what I told you that's just been happening, right? It's tearing down everything that you built up over all this time. And that's going to leave you, because you're so dependent in your mind on an administration or a politician to help you, instead of doing it, doing what you can yourself, insulating yourself from these types of attacks, okay, and building your own communities. Once again, this is what we need to establish, right? But who's leading the charge in that? Just maybe a few people out there, but who's really leading the charge? And nobody says you have to be in front of the camera like me, but what are you doing in your own communities, right? To help foster a new, more self-sufficient community, instead of, oh, this is happening to me, this is happening to me. And I'm not delegitimizing being a victim, because yes, there are legit victims in the world, right? We have been a victim of slavery. We have been a victim of discrimination to this day, okay? But that does no good talking about that unless you are doing something about it collectively. Not every man for himself. That every man for himself mentality is just another divide and conquer mentality. That's a Western mentality, okay? We need to adopt the village mentality once again, okay, in order to survive this. There's no other way to survive this. I don't care how successful that you think you may become. You're still divided, okay? You're just a successful person. You may have a lot of money in the Western world and feel that, oh, well, they need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps as well, which is sad, because, then they have succeeded in dividing you, right? And then you're gonna have I forget that syndrome where you adopt the mentality of your oppressor. And if you think the word oppressor is too strong, then you haven't really studied and listened to the live. Yes, I saw something the other day about freedom, right? Lincoln freed us, right, or whatever. Lincoln freed the slave, but the gentleman on that video said something it was a few words, not long-winded at all, but it summed everything up. He said, you're not free, never been free, all right? You don't make any laws, okay? You don't manufacture anything, you don't produce anything. You're just happy with having a job, right, that the man gave you, and you got a little jewelry on your neck, so you think you're free. Nah, far from freedom, guys. True independence means you run your own show, right? Back in the days when they had Black Wall Street and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Greenwood and Rosewood and those places, you had your own police stations. You policed your own people, okay? You don't have that now. You have another group of people policing your community like your cattle, right? Rounding you up whenever you get out of line. You know what I'm saying? You don't make any laws. You don't produce anything. What do we produce? What do we manufacture besides some lyrics to a nice beat in the studio? Okay. What is the culture? Really? What is it? Because every time I hear us talk about how great we are in the world, it always has to do with music. Oh, we are the culture, but we are our music. We create the best, that's where everything comes from. Music, our food, our style, our dress. We need to quit saying that. We really need to quit saying that. I'm not taking away from that, but if that's all you can define yourself as when it comes to culture, I never hear anything about inventions, innovation, all the inventions that we've put out into the world. I heard Trump the other day talk about, okay, we invented everything. I wish I could find that clip. I don't know if I need the rights to play it, but yeah, he was talking about, well, we invented everything. It's from the cell phone to the light bulb, this and that. These were African Americans that invented that stuff. Okay. And so when we talk about culture, to the world and what we have to offer to the world. I can care less about how dress and lyrics and hip hop and all that. I love that stuff. I like it, but that should be a small percentage of what we bring to the world, right? How people perceive us, right? But they know that we are the great inventors, right? That took them to the moon. Our female mathematicians, black female mathematicians, took these people to the moon, right? They don't talk about that in their schools, do they? That much, right? Right, because they would have to admit our genius and intelligence. Okay, so when we talk about culture and stuff, let's talk more about that stuff. Or let's include that as well, rather than just the food, the music, and the dance and the music. Okay, yeah, that's all entertainment. Okay, that's all entertainment. Let's talk about innovation. Okay, let's talk about the geniuses in our community that are doing things out there that you hardly hear about because the media doesn't want to talk about it, right? That's once again a reflection of how biased and racist this system is. Let's talk about the young African American girl who's the youngest person to attend medical school, and countless others that exist out there. Okay, let's talk about people like that. Let's put them to the forefront instead of the rappers and the athletes. Okay, so let's see. Anyway, guys, that's it for tonight. So, what does the next 30 years look like for us in the trades? Well, that's I would say what I would like it to look like is for us to build our own communities, to buy land and construct our own communities again, because this racism stuff isn't going away. These people they're not going to change. Okay, this is something that's deeply rooted, and it's survival for them, because without it it would be the destruction of their own identity, which is a very scary thing. Okay, it's very scary, and so don't count on it going away, and don't count on any politician fixing it. You're gonna have to fix it. Okay, the only way you can do that is to build your own communities and insulate your own communities as much as you can from this. All right, guys. So appreciate you listening. Hope you got something from it. If you want to support the channel, go to calibrate.com. The links are in the description, and look forward to the next video on something interesting about fixing something. All right. All right. Very good. Live No says music and sports are the marketed, but it's up to us to bring our inventions to social media. There are plenty of written documentation. Absolutely. Yes. It's up to us to bring these things to our kids, because they're the next generation that's going to, take the torch. You got to pass the torch to them and steer them in another direction, because the youth I see out here today, man, it's like there's so much opportunity because of social media. But there's also a lot of, it's a lot of just ignorance as well. Okay, so we need to do something about that. We have to bring it to our community. Absolutely, yes, that's our goal. That's nobody else's responsibility but us. Okay, out there, that's not going to change. All that stuff you see out there, it's not going to change. They're not going to change. They're going to be them till they die. So it's not up to us to depend on them to change. Quit crying out for them to, accept me. The hell with being accepted. You know who you are. Stick within your own community and foster your own, foster the values in your own community for those who want to hear. All right, and those who want to get on board, right? And that's all it comes down to. So anyway, guys, appreciate you. Share this live or whatever. Send it to somebody you know. And I'll see you guys in the next one.